You said none of what they're talking about is going to happen at the beginning of the show. Are you any more confident that something might get done in the legislature?
No. Well, I mean, I think there may be some discussion, and that in itself will be good, but I think change sometimes takes time. And I'm just not sure if there's a majority of the 197 legislators who are engaged enough. Part of it's because the General Assembly is majority rural, and even though they have some of the same problems, some people see this as just St. Louis's problem.
So are we starting to break down? Okay, so the new division will be rural versus city, and
That's not new.
It's not
Jefferson
new.
City, that's not new.
Yeah, that's not new.
30 years ago, you had super majorities that were Democrat and Republican governor, and to some degree, you've always had sort of regional issues, and it plays itself out when we deal with education priorities or transportation issues or things that affect a lot of different areas of public policy. There is sometimes regional coalitions that form, but I disagree a little bit in the sense that this law is named after Max Creek, as you brought up, which is a small rural town. The issue has been brought further to light because of the recent events. But there's, and I intend to highlight this in the debate, Lake Tapawingo on the western side of the state gets 75% of its revenue. There's actually a town, Foley, Missouri, in a statistical anomaly that gets over 100% of its revenue from traffic tickets and fines. So I think once people are aware of how this is playing out, it's offensive. It's offensive because if you want to do certain things with municipal government, you ought to have the guts to go and ask people to pay for it, as opposed to sort of doing exactly, and I hate to keep bringing up St. Anne, and I'm glad my grandmother doesn't have the same last name as me, who still lives in St. Anne.
But my aunt from St. Anne doesn't have the same last name as me.
Right, but the truth is, as the decline in sales tax revenue, and this is not unique to St. Anne, those municipalities a lot of times have found new and innovative ways to replace that revenue, and that's the issue. And because it's just very quiet, and it's just sort of evolved over time, and we're at where we're at, where Calverton Park gets 2/3 of its revenue from traffic tickets and fines. And I think you said it, that interaction, if that is the most frequent interaction that people have, it doesn't create an ideal scenario for building relationships. And I've talked to, their police officers. They don't go to the police academy to write tickets all day long. That's not why they. That's not why they became. They believe in community policing. They'd have more of their time to spend in the community, building relationships, getting tips, helping people. So I think that there is a way forward. Not everybody might see it the way I see it, but I think that we're going to get something done.
But is it only going to be the revenue aspect? I was watching Twitter, and the Arch City Defenders basically said that it needs to be more than just that. It has to be potentially staffing public defenders in some of these courts, or maybe merging a lot of these courts, or maybe even getting rid of municipal courts altogether. There's no, I guess, right for a municipal court.
No, you're right about that. There are things within the municipal courts that need to be reformed. The truth of the matter, though, is, and I've had discussions in Jefferson City with people who are, that a lot of those are by way of Supreme Court rule. And you've seen now a new Supreme Court rule because of some of the circumstances about, ability to pay. The truth of the matter is that's been in state statute for decades. The fact that you take that into account. But I think people are wising up to the idea these are civil infractions, and that people are going to jail, people are losing their jobs, people are, then their housing is at stake. This is not the right way to go about doing this. So I do think, Jason, you're right. It doesn't just stop on the revenue side. There's some actual court issues. What's in the purview of the courts by way of rule, and what should the legislature do? I think many of us are willing to tackle some of those issues, but we need to make sure that we're.
And I want to balance that off really quickly. We are talking about the revenue of a municipality. We've already discussed that there is an error in our statute right now because revenue is not adequately defined. This summer we went through the courts. There was an initial stay of the Max Creek law. Right now it's in appeal in the Supreme Court. But let me remind everyone, we are also talking about economic development. And if cities have an issue raising revenue, then let's have a proposal so that we have more investment in North County. As I engage with my 41 mayors and chairmen in North County that I represent, they're talking about redevelopment. That has not been part of the conversation. If we're going to have an honest discourse about infringing the rights of people, let's also offer some jobs. Let's be real about it.
Yeah, we need greater economic opportunity, and that's, again, we get back to this education. People need to be able to feel like no matter what zip code they live in, okay? That they're gonna be able to get a quality education and have an opportunity. That's how both of us got to where, everybody, the path, the truest path and the great equalizer is education. And we have to make sure that everybody in our community has access to that, and they don't right now.
No,
So-
they don't. So we've had decades of divestment in these, in North County and these inner ring municipalities. And it's played its way out in many ways that have been discussed here. The way that revenue is generated, people developing and carrying criminal records from a civil court. It's unconstitutional. You should not be able to do that. The schools are not adequately funded. They're not fairly funded or equitably funded based on how the revenue is generated and distributed. So when you talk about economic development, it is important that all of the legislators and leaders, elected and appointed officials, recognize the value of cooperating. St. Louis generates the majority of revenue for the entire state. It only makes sense that we use all of the assets that are available to maximize the revenue that we can generate there. And when you have that dense population and they're unemployed and uneducated, then we can't meet our regional goals. We've got goals. We're talking about innovation and entrepreneurialism. So entrepreneurs are bright people. They live in a different world and under a different structure. They can go anywhere. We can attract them, but we can't retain them. And that has to do with the culture of the community. They view community in a different way. They view their employment and their profession is so merged with who they are personally that they are living and working in their value space. So it's important for us to recognize that. So if we can't retain them, then we can't meet our goals for innovation. We can't meet our goals for startups. We can't say that we want to have plant and biosciences and build on the foundation of the institutions that we have here, and we can't attract or educate our population to take the jobs that we say that we want.
Well, and I will tell you too,
Doesn't make sense.
we have to also, because I think in this process of review, which is wholly appropriate. But we also have to recognize that we do, as a region, have a lot of things going for us. For a long time, I would say we were a big company town. My dad worked for Anheuser-Busch for 30 years, and uncle worked. But what's happened recently, and Popular Mechanics just ranked St. Louis as the #1 startup community. Some of them have them. St. Louis ranked as the startup community you've never heard of. You've got a situation now. Washington Avenue's been revitalized. You have Arch Grants that's been formed. You have a different entrepreneurial spirit in this region that didn't exist 10 years ago. So there are opportunities. We have great institutions, Washington University, St. Louis University, University of Missouri, St. Louis. We have a lot of things going for us. Cortex is a great example. So we need to highlight that, but we also have to have, as chair of the Economic Development Committee, a lot of the companies that I talk to, you need to have a qualified workforce in that community. That is one of the biggest things that companies will look at. So again, we get back to this education issue.
Even if you want to be cynical, there's something in it for all of us to take care of the things we're talking
Absolutely.
about here. All right, Becky, I've kept.
That's all
I don't
right.
mean to ignore you. We'll give you the last word because you had such a positive way to end the last segment.
Well, I think Jason really kind of pointed it out. It's two sides of the same coin. We certainly need all of the conversation that was just happening, but at the end of the day, it's going to be personal relationships, and that's what every citizen that is watching this right now can commit themselves to learning what the issues are and building these bridges one person at a time. And I think that is when we understand each other and we know each other, we'll fight for each other. And I think it's going to be, St. Louis needs to be the best place to live, the best relationships in America. That's who we need to be.